The Roman legion of the 1st century BC was a highly professional, disciplined, and semi-permanent force. The old distinctions within the Roman army that were based on age, property, and wealth were no longer in use. Now, most soldiers were recruited from the landless poor of the cities, the Capitacensi. Joining the army offered them a career with an annual salary of 125 denarii, or 500 sestertii. He could also look forward to a small plot of land once he had been discharged. What was not to like?
Well, there's the loss of rights, the brutal military discipline, the possibility of a violent death.
The greatest part of a legion was made up of heavy infantry, the legionaries. A Roman legionary typically wore a tunic made of either linen or wool, depending on the climate or the season. On top of this, mail armour provided protection for the body, while a scarf wrapped around the neck prevented the metal rings from chafing the skin. A woolen cloak doubled up as a coat or a blanket, while a tight belt supported the weight of the armour. Each legionary was equipped with a short sword, the gladius, on his right, and a dagger on his left, as well as one or perhaps two javelins, or pila. A Gallic-style helmet made of bronze or occasionally iron protected the head. Though the cheeks were guarded, the ears remained uncovered, allowing the legionary to hear orders more clearly. Each man was equipped with a large curved shield, or scutum, which was typically oval in shape, though the rectangular version may well have been in widespread use by the time of the late Republic. A legionary on the march by this period was expected to carry most of his own supplies and equipment, which weighed upwards of 40 pounds. Leather sandals with hobnailed soles, called caligae, kept the feet well ventilated in the heat, and allowed water to drain easily when wet. Each man would carry a wooden fork, called a furca, in order to carry his kit, spare clothes, sandals, bowls, plates, and eating utensils, construction tools, food, and other personal items. The most basic unit of the Roman legion was the so-called Contubernium, which consisted of 8 legionaries. These men would train together, eat together, and sleep together. The Contubernium may also have been split up into pairs, and these pairs would go on sentry duty together. If one comrade was killed in battle, the other would see to it that his family were informed, and he would subsequently make the necessary funeral arrangements. Each Contubernium possibly chose one of its own members as a decanus, or chief of 10. This was a reference to the 2 additional members of the Contubernium who were not legionaries but servants who attended the mule, the tent, the cooking pot and the millstone that were assigned to each group. 10 Contubernia formed a century of 80 fighting men. Each century was led by a centurion, whose pay was sometimes as much as 10 times higher than that of an ordinary legionary. This may suggest a social divide. A centurion was required to have a good grasp of literacy and numeracy, and so they were probably drawn from the more prosperous and better educated classes in Roman society. The centurion's symbol of office was a vine staff, which he used to direct military maneuvers and beat disobedient soldiers. A centurion would handpick his own second-in-command, the optio, who would take up a position at the back of the century during battle, observing, supervising, organising, and encouraging the men. The position of the centurion himself is uncertain, but the most common theory is that he would stand to the right of the front line. They led from the front and suffered high casualties as a result. Accompanying each century would be a signifer, a cornicen, and a tesserarius. The signifer carried the signum, or standard, of the century, while the cornicen carried a G-shaped horn called a cornu, which he used for communicating orders to the legionaries during battle. The Tesserarius assigned and organised those men who were selected to stand guard at night, and was named after a small wooden block or tile called a tessera, which contains secret watchwords. 6 centuries were grouped together into a cohort of 480 men, and 10 cohorts made up a legion. The first cohort consisted of the most experienced men, and was unique in that it was made up of 5 double-strength centuries, each consisting of 160 men, giving the cohort an overall strength of 800. As the most prestigious cohort in the legion, it was tasked with protecting the silver or golden eagle, which served as the standard of the entire legion and was carried by the aquilifer. It is highly probable that 1 centurion in each cohort took precedence over the other 5 and acted as the overall commander of the cohort. The 5 centurions of the first cohort formed a group known as the centurions of the first grade. They were present at the general's briefings, and it is possible that the other senior centurions joined too. The most senior centurion in the first cohort and in the entire legion was known as the primus pilus, a position that carried immense prestige. The legion had no permanent commander. In typical Roman style, the most senior positions were only ever temporary appointments. The commander of the legion was the legate, and these men were drawn from the senatorial class, the most elite in Roman society, and were usually appointed by the Senate. Typically, they rarely held the position for more than 3 years, but while they were there, the legate had full command of the legion. It is important to remember that legates were merely subordinates. They commanded the legion on behalf of a magistrate, such as a consul or a provincial governor, who may have an army of several legions under his command. Beneath the legate were 6 military tribunes. Traditionally, when Rome typically had 4 legions, 2 per consul, the 24 military tribunes were elected each year by the Roman people. But by the 1st century BC, most were probably appointed by the overall commander, and many, if not all, would have been the sons of friends or relatives. The most senior of the military tribunes was the broad-striped tribune, the Tribunus Laticlavius. The broad stripe on the tunic was a symbol of the senatorial class. He was a young aristocrat doing a military internship in order to embark on a political career back at Rome. The other 5 tribunes were thin-striped tribunes, the Tribuni Angusticlavi. The thin stripe was a sign of the lesser nobility, the equestrians, and these men would serve on the staff of the legate and occasionally command cohorts in the field. All in all, the Roman legion had a theoretical strength of 5,120 legionaries. Each of the 59 centuries had a centurion, an optio, a signifer, a cornicen, and a tesserarius, bringing the total up to about 5,500 men. In addition to these was an aquilifer carrying the legion's eagle, as well as 6 military tribunes and a legate. To supplement the legion would have been over 1,000 men to attend over 500 mules, tents, cooking pots, and millstones. The overall annual pay for the legionaries alone would have been at least 640,000 denarii, over 2.5 million sestertii, without taking into account the pay of the senior officers, who received considerably more. And by the 1st century BC, the legions would have relied on foreign or allied mercenaries for cavalry and light infantry, inflating this figure even further. The Roman legion was an effective and well-organised fighting force, but the recruits were no longer drawn from amongst the small landholders of Italy to serve a temporary period in defence of the state. Instead, the legions were packed with some of the poorest of Roman citizens who came to rely on their commander for a generous pension, usually in the form of a farm. This profoundly shifted their sense of loyalty from the state to the commander himself. The fierce political competition in Rome was now given a military dimension. It was only a matter of time before senatorial rivalries spilled over into full-scale battles that pitted Roman legion against Roman legion.